Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Events with Intent, how to make ROI your blueprint. Thank you for spending 30 minutes with us on what I hope is a wonderful Wednesday. I am joined today by Brent Turner from Opus Agency. Brent is the EVP of Strategy and Solutions. And Opus, if you're not aware of them, but they're one of the hottest and innovative agencies out there. They work with the cool kids like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Dell, Salesforce, TikTok, all of the other baddies out there, right? That they consult and they help them reach their goals. And we'll talk about this later, but you can imagine how different those goals are for each company and each event. Brent's hobbies include writing really interesting blogs on tech and marketing industry. I highly recommend you Google him. He loves collecting pencils and notebooks and making lists of threes. So you will hear the list that Brent is going to share. Also joining us today, and I have collectively named these two the strategy bros for today's purposes, just because they both have strategy in their job title. But Mark is Swoogo's chief strategy officer. Mark has been in the event and tech world for over 20 years. He started when he was 3. And Mark strongly believes customers can and should demand more for event tech. Because, yeah, why do you have it if it's not going to do what you need it to do, right? Mark's hobbies include eating, taking the ferry in Seattle to literally everywhere because he lives on some remote island. And Mark is a former drummer for the Grateful Dead. Just kidding. But today we're going to talk about how you can create your own blueprint, right? And I know you're saying, I know, Jahan, but tell me what to do. And I would love to tell you specifically what to do. But as the kids say in some movie, I can't remember what it is right now, I don't know your life. I don't know what your goals are. I don't know who your customers are. I don't know who your stakeholders are, right? So what we are doing today, we are equipping you with a framework. And not everybody is in a position to have a wonderful agency like Opus and Brent at your fingertips, right? So Brent is here to share his genius and how he walks through getting his clients to understanding what their ROI really is and how to plan for that before you even put pencil to your favorite notepad, Brent, and make those rules, right? Or make your intent, because what is action without intent, right? It's not the thought that counts. No, if he wanted to, he would have gotten you that ROI. But when this topic first came up, Mark, you had some strong feelings about that. And tell me why it's so important for you that people work backwards in the event industry.
Sure, happy to. And by the way, good morning, Jahan. Hello, Brent. So good to see you.
Hello.
Happy to be
You
here
too.
with you. Good question, Jahan. I think too often in the world of events, whether it's event technology, planning events, logistics, content marketing, whatever the case might be, there's so much thought that's put into how are we going to execute the event? How are we going to get people in and out? How are we going to get people to the venue? How are we going to move them through the lines? How are we going to feed them? How are we going to check them in? So it dawned on me that all of that becomes infinitely easier and much more meaningful, honestly, if there's a clear perspective on the why. Why are we doing this event in the first place? And I got to thinking that every event that is put on, no matter how you categorize that event, does have a why behind it. And what I mean when I say why is there has to be some goal for the event that isn't just about having a well executed event per se, but rather the result you're looking for coming out of that event. And I want to, my goal here and my hope is that everybody who is attending, everybody's participating in this webinar leaves with some perspective about the importance of understanding that why. And that why is, in my world, in my perspective, through my lens, is a return on the effort, on the investment, on the experience, however you wish to sort of coin that term. What do you expect your attendees to get out of it? And what does it mean for you as an organization? Why did you put it on? And how are you going to understand if you met your objectives? And quite frankly, if it's worth doing that thing again in the future. So that's some perspective about why I thought it was so important that we have this webinar.
I love that. And sharing is caring. And as we elevate the industry, we remind everyone how important events are. Before we define that ROI, right, or what ROI could be, I did want to remind everyone that to the right of your screen, you have chat and you have Q&A. Please feel free to drop your questions in. We'll get to those throughout the webinar and at the end if we have time. Brent, to you. We talk about ROI. What does that mean to you? And what does that mean when you're talking to your clients? How do you pull out of them, like, ROI could be anything. Like Mark said, is it number of seats and butts? Is it leads? Is it pipeline? What is it? And how do you get to what is most important?
First, for the people in chat, I think we should take the next 5 minutes to complain about the weather, since here where I live in Boston, it was crossed 100 degrees. For Christoph in Germany, that's 37 Celsius yesterday. So, and now we got Richmond. We got a lot of people who are feeling the heat. So, hi everybody in chat. We'll complain about, I guess, the heat later. To your question, one of the things when you have strategy in your title, you get asked, like, what does a good strategy look like? And you also get asked, what the hell do you do all day? But what does a good strategy look like? And the way I describe it, like when I'm looking at, say, a strategy deck with a client, I can tell you it's really good if it does two things. Two things are very clear in that strategy. One is, which will be not the focus for today, but one is every event that is listed. Let's say I'm looking at a portfolio-wide strategy deck. Every event that's listed has a single focus on the attendee value. They understand what the attendees are going to get. And we'll talk more about part of measurement is understanding and mapping how your attendees are going to measure their own value they receive on their investment. But the core to this key question of the why, the focus is, do you have a single-minded goal for your event? A single goal. Like, and the best events, the clients that I work with that do sort of the best events, in my opinion, are the ones where if you look at their entire portfolio, often it's mapped to, I know people will say the funnel is dead, but often you can map an event portfolio to the marketing funnel. And it's like, all right, so if we're doing a road show, that is a pipe acceleration event. Our number one goal is pipe acceleration. If I'm doing a flagship event, take a massive flagship event, pick one from the industry we all know. It could do 1,000 things for your brand, but the ones that are the best, in my opinion, are where they say, I'm doing this event for this reason. It is my closing event. It is my loyalty event. It is my pipe gen event. And so, and you can do this for internal events. You can do it for incentives and clubs and all the rest. But that long babble made short is, if there are two sentences in your strategy deck, one that is the single for each event you're doing, it's the single-minded reason, the single focus for what the attendee value is going to be, and then the single focus of the main primary goal for your event. You do those two things and you're already out the gate moving in the right direction.
That sounds really easy, right? But I think easier said than
easy.
done. Yeah, because my next question, and when you were saying single attendee value, what your stakeholders care about, when we say stakeholders, usually we're like, okay, it's my board, it's my manager, it's my C-suite, and your attendees value. So I like that you specifically said attendee value. And for me, there's sometimes a gray line between like, oh, the attendees are happy, so that's going to lead to pipe, but not necessarily. So how do you marry those and you make everybody happy?
For a different webinar, I have a whole talk track where we talk about how the biggest challenge in corporate events right now isn't budget and all the other things that are out there. It is helping leaders within businesses outside of event and marketing teams realize that their stakeholders, actually their attendee, not the boss, not your C-suite, not your board, and that blows minds. But let's take this now into that next part of like a measurement framework. In the way we go at it is, too often, let me back up to the problem. Too often, the challenge with a measurement plan or a measurement deck, and there's 100 reasons why measurement in events is probably one of the hottest topics for 10 years, and nobody's really seemed to crack it. And one of the big reasons I say it hasn't been cracked as an industry is we're trying to make a single dashboard that works for everybody. And so let's take that word stakeholder and make it mean all a 360 of all the stakeholders in your event. Now let's think about making your dashboard. Let's say if your first slide of your deck is the single-minded purpose for the event, now let's talk about who your stakeholders are. Let's pretend this is your second slide. And what you're going to do on that slide is draw 4 boxes. And you're going to have, it's 4, not 3. Well, we'll go with it. You're going to have 4 boxes, and you're going to do those by audience. So for your event team, you're going to say, these are my return on objectives. Like you're in that, you're going to take maybe 3 or 4. There can be 100 goals, but like let's take 3 or 4 indicators, KPIs, put them there. They might be things like your financials, your NPS on your actual events, your butts and seats, right? Your next one is typically more tied to a business owner. So like you would maybe imagine this is your CEO, and this is your return on ROI. This is your return on investment. This is where you're saying, all right, if it's a external pipe gen event, you're going to have metrics in there on pipe in room and revenue goals and accounts touched and all that, those kind of business metrics. Your third box, now you want to step out to the marketers in the room. So your CMOs, what do they care about? Well, they care about your return on that experience overall. So metrics you could put in there are loyalty or NPS for the brand overall, preference, though that type of metric, right? That those are for the marketers in the room. And then finally, that fourth box is for that attendee. And like the industry, it's too easy to say a return on attendance, but that's the idea. Like, did we actually measure that value we delivered for the attendee, that they actually also received their own ROI as well? So when you step back, now you have a dashboard. Ideally, it's like a 4x4, right? Like you have this simple dashboard to tell the story of metrics for your event. Hey, events team, did we hit these core goals of success of the product we're making, which is an event? Hey, C-suite and board, these are your 4 metrics. Hey, CMO and marketing team, these are how we're moving the brand and moving marketing forward. And then, hey, for the product we actually created for the attendees, because that's why we're doing these, like for the attendees, here's the metrics that matter for you. And now you have yourself a nice framework to work from.
I like that, Brent. So let me add some perspective that I'm thinking about. If it's so important, that part, that in each of these pillars, that everybody who's part of that pillar understands clearly what that end goal is overall for the entire group, right? And if I really want to simplify it in my mind, I think about it this way: that let's say I want to be more healthy as an individual. And many ways I could accomplish that. I could eat better. I could exercise. I could meditate. I could ... There's lots of choices. If I have a clear understanding about what it is, my end goal, my game, and how I'll measure that, then I'll be able to ascertain and understand which of these activities most strongly contributes to that end goal. And I'm thinking about that for all of these stakeholders. If everybody has that clear, I'll keep saying it, ROI in mind, everybody within those pillars is going to have a very clear understanding about how their actions can contribute to that end goal. So I really like that paradigm that you just painted for us, given that light.
Yeah. To me, it's not only the boxes, but it's a Venn diagram also. Is it a Venn diagram if you have multiple circles? Yes, right? No?
It could be. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But because there's going to be there has to be some overlap in there, because that then takes you to the logistics. How do we, if I have a happy hour, if I have a reception, what can I do and make this personalized to achieve all of these goals? So, to Mark's example, abs are made in the kitchen, ROI results are made in the planning process of bringing teams together. I think that's another focus that I want to call out from your descriptions just now, right? From your framework or your 4 boxes, is working with those teams. And I know some of you out there might be like, but I am a team, like it's me. So how do you, and I know you work with the big sexy brands, how would you advise smaller teams smaller teams on really getting in a seat at the table? Maybe.
Great question.
3-part answer. Because
Wow.
threes. We're just gonna keep it going, and I'll make up the third as I get to it. No, one of the at the seat of the table, the first was, this is a different diatribe I have, which is too many brand side teams don't think of they think of their events team in a similar sort of, like, we have PR, we have marketing, we have this, and they think events are just another channel. And the first sort of scoop of perception that we've used to help people sort of get a seat at the table overall is to help their executive teams understand that events are actually a product. And the same way that if you're a CPG product, you know what that product has, or let's use a SaaS company. If you're Swoogo, right? What does Swoogo have as a product? You have a brand, you have a marketing go-to-market motion, you have a tech platform, you have a financial platform, you have XYZ. And what is an event? It literally has all of the same attributes. It has product design, content, marketing, branding in the event. And too many executive teams just don't they don't necessarily carry the gravitas that says an event is a product of my company. It has the same ecosystem and everything around it. So one of the diatribes we use, which is outside of the ROI narrative today, but like is if you come to a table and the first thing is everybody at that table is understanding to Shay's comment here, like is events are a product, it then immediately sets the next parts of the dynamic and changes that. So then let's go to the next two parts of the dynamic. There are two sides to measurement that are around all those boxes, right? One is the inputs. Like, how are you actually going to get the data? And it doesn't matter. You could be some of the largest clients that you just talked about, or you could be the start. We also work with startups and those interesting companies who want to challenge the big ones. It doesn't matter if you're a 1-person team or a 100-person team. Figuring out how you're going to get the data is one of the major challenges. Like, how are you going to listen for it? The surveys you're going to run, the analytics platforms, and that could be its own. That's its own. Frankly, we spend more money on consulting we make more money with clients trying to figure out how to get the inputs to measure. The dashboard is fairly straightforward usually to make. It's all all right, well, how are we going to measure that becomes the next problem. And so you have to be able to, at the seat of the table, you have to go in with at least a sense of how are you going to pull the metrics. Now, the third point is metrics have the inherent challenge of if I told you that this webinar had 100 people on it, or I told you it had 100,000 people on it, is that good or bad? Well, 100,000 sounds good, but maybe 100 is good, like for your scale and your brand and the rest. And so benchmarks, comparisons, being able to give people context to the metric. So it's going to be great if you can nail on that slide 2, right? You can nail that executive dashboard. You can then figure out how to. You got people coming to the table thinking it's a product. They look at the executive dashboard. You know how you're going to get the inputs to feed it. You're feeling good. The next hurdle at that table is to then say, let me give you context to all these numbers on here. I'm at the table now, and by the way, that's what keeps you coming back to the table, because you're telling them, is 100 good? Or is 100 something I need to be improved on? Is 100 something we celebrate, or is 100 an aspiration? And so you put all that together, the right mindset with a strong framework in the middle and inputs underneath, and then context, benchmarks, etc., to support it. Now you've filled in your full picture to have that seat at the table.
I like that.
Brent, thinking about our attendees here for this webinar, I think you really highlighted something for me that it's about the individual and how they can contribute, which we've talked about. I think it's so important that people build that muscle about becoming clear about what that ROI is, and really getting tuned in and dialed into it. And it's a very safe and a very good question to ask. Why are we doing this? How are we going to measure this ROI, and how can I contribute to it? And I'll tell you something that really matters, I think, for everybody in their career and what they're doing on their daily basis, is to really, people gravitate to people who get it. And I think it's okay for people to demand to get it, to really ask the questions and be super clear. And Jihan, I'll give you credit for this as Swoogo. Jihan is somebody who's always asking why. What's our end goal? What are we trying to get out of this? And she really has a broad perspective and I would say a 360-degree view on how we view our efforts, particularly in growth marketing. So it's important that people stand up and really know that it's important, and it's okay for them to understand, I need to know the why so that I can contribute in the very best way I can.
Exactly. Thanks, Mark. Also, I learned the why. I really get it reinforced by my 5-year-old. This morning, he asked me why dragons are named dragons. Dude, I don't know. Okay. But it's also that's also, I would also like to go on a diatribe, not now, but, advocating for event professionals to ask more why. Don't take your marching orders, for lack of a better term, and just go with it, because think about how much more intentional we can be with our logistics, with our promo plan, with our event marketing and demand gen if we know the why. Now, going back to the ROI conversation, you talked about knowing the measurements, knowing what you want to measure.
Yep.
How do you know that? Okay, if we say my ROI is an NPS of I don't know, 99. How you have to think about that before you go in, because you're like, oh, which surveys am I sending out? So you have to think about the end. Again, this whole podcast, this whole webinar is about thinking about the end. So can you actually predict an ROI? Like, how close have you been, or how close can anyone get to predicting ROI?
It could be a podcast. Jake's right. The predicting ROI overall, even with some of the best data science teams, we've struggled on some of the biggest clients I work with, and again to the small. And a lot of it is too often ROI, or not too often, often ROI is tied to financial metrics. And now you're getting into more complex attribution modeling. And like what is like, and different businesses, they have different metrics and ways to think of overall like attribution modeling. So you start to go back to what event professionals naturally start to do is go back to the metrics they can own, like butts and seats. Like I may not be able to give you ROI on pipe gen. I can give you a target working with my sales team, but like let's use an external pipe gen event. Like it gets hard because of the broader beyond the events team parts of a true CEO interest and care about, because now you're talking marketing wide, say an attribution model. So that gets a little tricky. However, the first part of rigor in setting predictions is in that sort of benchmarking piece I was talking before, is to start to get a rigor into your team on forecast where you can. And so an easy forecast, an easy sort of gateway into the world of predictions is on your attendance. Like there are two metrics that we use with clients, or two exercises we use with clients in this space. One is most businesses know their TAM, their total addressable market, for their overall marketing business. Well, how many marketers or event leaders have taken a TAM and done the same model, sliced it down, and drawn their own funnel for potential audience for their event? Probably a few on the call or a few in the meeting. Now it's a call, podcast, meeting, webinar, where you've been asked to drive your show from 1,000 people to 2,000. You're like, I don't know where we're going to get another 1,000 people from. Like if you've been asked to drive growth, maybe you've done some TAM, but often that like first piece is your TAM. The second, especially for people who are doing a repeatable event, is start to try to forecast your T minus registration. Like, how can we look and say, all right, so here's where we should be 5 weeks out, 6 weeks out. And a lot of companies do this. They just pull last year's or the last 2 years, but you can, and fairly easy in an Excel sheet in this day and age, you can start to put in forecasting formulas and get a sense to say, here's where your metrics could go. And so using reg data, like, and I'm not pandering to this because we're Swoogo, this is literally the gateway to prediction. Is if I can start to predict my audience and I can start to predict my reg patterns, you have now opened up a narrative and a way of thinking in your events team that partners with others in marketing, that then opens the door to the challenge of conversion and attribution, which opens the holy grail to, can I use my benchmarks, my comparisons, what I know, to start to set predictive metrics on that 99 NPS that you're going for.
Yeah,
I love it, Brent.
Those teams. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brent, by the way, you can pander about Swoogo and registration all you want. In this house, you can do that.
Very good. And I'll tell for the audience, our team is massive fans of all things Swoogo. So let's get that testimonial in, because there's many on the Opus Agency side who are obsessed with Swoogo.
Thank you. So look, I think something you highlighted there that really resonated with me was this idea of sort of cross-functional collaboration as you're thinking about your TAM, as you're thinking about measurements, cooperation between marketing and sales, for example, and the events team, and any way you wish to define it, but having everybody in lockstep and everybody sort of saying, how can we collectively develop a system, a process in order to set us up for success so that when the event is over, we are able to extract whatever data points that we can and utilize those to measure our ROI. And another interesting thing about ROI, and you brought this up before, we have teams of data scientists trying to figure this out at corporations. So much of it is not a metric. So much of it, I'll give you an example. You were on this webinar today with us, Brent, because you and I met at the Experiential Marketing Summit, and we hung out and we chatted. And what came out of it? Suddenly here you are on our webinar, and I'm sure other things will then build off of that over time. And there's a return on that. It's just so hard to gauge it. It's so hard to assign an attribute or a number, or maybe you do have an idea, and please, I have my pen ready.
Ha! No, you know what? I will say unmeasurable. I'll make up a word.
Yeah.
Parts you can't measure. Like one of the things that COVID, still talking about that 5 years later, one of the things that
Mhm.
COVID exposed for organizations is the importance of setting up a microphone and a spotlight and telling your entire organization to rally around that moment, the tent poles, the milestones. And we saw in COVID that product launches were sliding at major companies because there wasn't the tent pole moment. We saw that there was internal rallying and culture and community building, and this idea of how do we sort of create a movement with our marketing, because we're bringing all the developers, the software users, pick your audience, forward. And so outside of, well, we want to make that dashboard tangible and show what it's creating, we also know in events that creating a swell that builds up toward and puts the stage and the microphone there and then pulls across has immeasurable value as well.
Love it. Love it. Jeanne, we're going to take some questions.
Yeah, let's go. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We will be sending out this on demand, and we will be doing a recap blog, so look out for that. Jill, don't worry, we'll send this to your VP of marketing. We have 3 minutes left, Brent. I wanted to go back to your 3 I's of success, right? Just so everybody gets it. You've got your indicators, which are, correct me if I'm wrong, these are the things that you are measuring, right? This is your
KPIs.
reach, revenue, your NPS. Then on your second I are the initiators. These are the spots that would get the impact on your measurement. Can you go a little bit more into the initiators?
Yeah.
Because I want to really wrap my head around that.
Yeah. So your 3 I's are your you get your indicator KPIs, and then on the other end is your inputs. But this one in the middle is really your products that you're putting in the world, like your initiators overall. So we've talked holistically about an event and the core product of the event. But as we all know, events have ancillaries, they have expo, they have other elements to it. And each of those can have their own purpose. So the larger your show and the more complex things, this also means you have more things in those initiators that can move. And if you can map all that out, so this would be your next slide, your third slide in this sort of deck, right? Which is, all right, now let me look into all the spots I should be measuring. Like, how did the expo help me drive this? How did that ancillary? How did the cab that I ran, or the CISO or the exec summit track that I had? Like, you also need to make sure while we're trying to simplify, set the center of the bullseye, set those 4 targets, knowing your initiators and knowing and being thoughtful on, all right, what data and what sub-purpose and the rest, all these other elements of my show can do. Well, if I say it even simpler, is while you need to measure your whole show, you also, as you get deeper into your blueprint, into your framework, you have to make sure that each of your elements or your initiators in that show also have a focused measurement plan to bring it forward.
So you're seeing the forest and the trees. Everything is, and I like to even think of Unconventional, our annual user conference, as a collection of micro events. What I have not been great at is measuring those collection of micro events. So I will be getting better at that. We have about, we are actually at time, but Brent, I would like you to leave us with something everyone should know.
Really, measurement is as much, I'll say the opposite side of measurement. Measurement is a culture, but there is the old famous saying in business, which is businesses are what they measure, right? Like, and there's better ways. People said that HBR has all these sayings like, whatever you measure on one side, you end up over indexing, and everybody goes that way. So to contradict what I said at the beginning, which is every event should have a single goal, you also need to make sure you are thinking about that and buttressing it with other goals, because anytime if we say, quality is job number 1, everybody's going to race to quality. This is an old famous Ford example. Everybody's going to race to quality, but you're going to miss goals on customer experience or something else. So always balance. Keep in mind that single-minded focus opens up and sets a narrative culture and will open everything we just talked about. But also remember that you are what you measure. And you have to keep in mind ways to buttress and build that forest as you go, so that you don't over-index too much in the wrong spot for your long-term success.
Okay, so we gotta
Love
be
it.
focused, but we also gotta be open. But we gotta be focused on being open.
Yes, and you got to know if you
Simple.
start sliding too much one way, you haven't lost something over here.
Got it.
It's
Got it.
it's the contradiction of it all. But the good news is, if you are measuring and you have a culture of measurement in place, all of this naturally comes forward.
Love it. Hillary, we will be sending out a recap. And real quick, Brent, do you want to take this question? How would you approach establishing ROI for internal celebratory events beyond basic attendance? So this is getting a
The
little clearer.
Yeah, these are more, Heather. These become more psychological oriented or change oriented. So on internal events, one of our favorite is to use a three-phase measurement approach, and this is going to be a little less on the dashboard, more of the approach. Get your benchmarks going in for how people feel on certain parts of it, like maybe it's culture or recognition or how they're being rewarded, or their likelihood to recommend your company to appear for employment, those kind of things. Make sure you know your benchmarks going in. Then immediately after the event, ask the same questions, and then do that again 60 days later. You'll have things like you can do fancy metrics like content utility score, which is a little different than a celebratory event, but like an internal SKO. Like, did people actually apply 60 days after the event? Did they actually apply what they learned, etc.? But for in something like a celebratory event, you want to spend time, or I like to recommend that we spend time on those human things, like likelihood to recommend, loyalty, preference, and then personal satisfaction, types like that. And then make sure you just benchmark that over 3 points of time, because now you can tell a story, not just how somebody cared after the event, but before, immediately after, and then your long-term effect.
Brent, you called out, I think internal events, you do have this concept of emotion, action, and outcome. And ROI can be made up of those. It can be made up of emotion. It can be made up of implied action. And I guess, Jehan, since we're coming to an end of this, I just wanted to encourage everybody out there, start off your meetings by reviewing, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this event? What is our ROI? Make that important. Don't make that an afterthought. Don't make that something else that somebody else is going to have to worry about, and be part of that solution. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes, it shouldn't be a surprise when you come to the end of your event, or else,
Right.
we spent a lot of money on a fancy party, or maybe not a fancy party. Before we leave, Brent, where can everyone find you?
So, well, just quick, Mark, you dropped that gem at the end. Emotion, action, outcome, 3 and written down. You can find me online. LinkedIn is the home to all, where I spend most of my time these days. I do have a personal newsletter on the side that you heard about in my blog there at the beginning, but find me on LinkedIn. That's where you can learn about me, and more importantly, all the Opus Agency things that we're putting out in the world. We have a good time. We have our own agency newsletter. That's where we share it.
Brent
Right.
is a great follow. He's a great follow. So is Jehan.
And so are you, Mark,
Yes.
when you post.
Well, thanks.
All right. Thank you all so much for spending 34 of your minutes with us today. We will be sending out a recap and an on-demand video. Let us know if you have any questions. Let us know how you found this webinar, and have a great day.